last October, there was a shooting in our new residence hall, the American River Courtyard, by police of one of the students that lived in one of the 5-person suites. Allegedly, the young man that was shot by police, Karan Jones, beat his roommate to death with a baseball bat, and then when the campus police came to their suite, he went after the police officers with a knife. So after trying to stop him other ways, which didn't work, they shot him and paralyzed him.
At first, everybody was just kind of a little shocked. It didn't seem realistic, but they worked really well with me. A few of them took it more emotionally than the other ones. Everyone worked really well. They were really quick to respond.
We realized it was very important to get the story out as soon as possible for our community to see, hear, and be able to experience this.
As a journalist, I remember feeling a shot of adrenaline go through me because I was covering the Sac State campus, and I had access to everything that I needed to have a really good on-the-spot story.
This is weird to say, but I was excited. I came up here, I threw down my bags. I immediately thought, oh God, a news story, like we're gonna get this, we're gonna be the first people on this. Even while we were in the dorms and talking to people, it didn't really hit me until we talked with the one roommate and told him what happened, and the look on his eyes suddenly hit me that, oh my God, somebody just died, somebody's friend just died. It was awful at that moment. It was really hard for me to decide what was more important to me, the story or the person, I guess. Honestly, at that point, I wanted to throw down my notebook and my pencil and just give up and give that kid a hug and say, I'm so sorry. But I had a job to do, so I didn't. I did go up to him afterwards and let him know, if you want anybody just to talk to, we're here for you. It doesn't have to be on the record if you just need a hug. And he did give me a hug and gave me his phone number, for questioning and stuff. But it was hard. It made me feel bad not bad, but it made me understand the people that had to give me the bad news in the past, even though they weren't journalists. It's just, I think sometimes telling somebody the news is actually harder than getting the news in a weird way.
Actually, I was getting ready to leave here for the day, like leave early for once, which is a rarity, and I got a call from a former staffer who works at a weekly paper who just happened to be listening to a police scanner and heard the call for the fire department that there was something going on campus, possibly a stabbing. He called us immediately as I was getting ready to walk out the door, and I grabbed one of my managing editors and we ran over to the residence halls.
It just started a whirlwind of activities at school and at our newspaper.
As a photographer, it was exciting to hear that something was happening on campus. I didn't know it was going to be so intense.
The first thing that went through my head was like, yeah, okay, we're going to go run around for 20 minutes looking for this, and it's going to turn out to be nothing at the most, a couple guys pushing each other, and one guy pulled out a knife and left it at that. So honestly, these things don't happen on college campuses very often, so my first thought was, another false alarm.
I got there and there were police running everywhere, and they wouldn't allow us to get in the building itself, but we managed to get to the lobby, and that's where we waited for the next thing to happen. And that's when we saw both the victim and the suspect being dragged out of the place.
It was my first time covering anything this violent, and definitely my first time covering a homicide. I've dealt with these things in my life before, but not as a journalist, so I tried to keep in mind that for somebody this was their friend or their child, and that I had to be sensitive in that case, but also as a journalist, it was my job to get every single fact and detail that I could.
Initially I was excited, and I wasn't thinking about shutter speeds, f-stops, anything to do with photography. I just had the camera in my hand and I documented. I really didn't think. And it wasn't until the victim was being carried to the ambulance that I noticed that he was moving a little bit. So I was wondering, is this guy alive or dead? And when I noticed that he moved a little bit, I was like, oh, good, he's alive. But then this thing happened when they were putting him in the ambulance and his shoe fell off. And the paramedic picked it up and put it on the foot. And it just fell again. And that's when it hit me really hard. Like, wow, this is really happening.
somebody had died. It wasn't just that a spot news event was occurring. This was a student our age and somebody that we may not have known but could have related to. And for me personally, Scott's family reminded me of my own family. After losing my mom a few years ago, I really wanted somebody to do a story about her life, and nobody ever did. And so when I was talking to Scott's parents, and they were telling me stories about how he was so happy all the time, and how he loved to sort of be this history buff, and just how they broke down on the phone, it reminded me of my own pain that I had kind of gone through a year prior, and it just made me really want to tell a good story and really let people know that this person wasn't just a statistic or wasn't just a Sac State ID number. He really had a family that was mourning the loss of a brother and a son and a grandson, and somebody that had really overcome adversity in life. And that brought me back to my own story and my own family, and I was really able to relate.
Every time I drive by the residence hall where this happened, I cannot help but I look to see if there are news cameras out there, if I see satellite dishes springing from trucks, and they're never there. But every single time I look, and yeah, I think each time I get a glimpse of something random that happened.
When I was 20, gosh, this summer will be the 20th anniversary, some good friends of mine and I were in a gang fight. And one of my friends was stabbed and killed, and he was one of my best friends since middle school, and I held him while he died, and it was a pretty traumatic thing to watch, someone you're close to's guts spilling out on the floor of a club as they pass away in your arms. And seeing those two kids brought out on stretchers, the first thought that went through my mind was, God damn, that kid's dead, and I've seen this shit before. And I think especially that first night, the whole night as we were working on this, those two images kept juxtaposing themselves in my head. The image of my friend being taken away on a gurney dead when I was a kid, and the image of Scott Hawkins being wheeled out on a gurney dead.
He went limb. It's like, I guess it's like I saw his life run out of him, and it's not easy.
I think one of the biggest things for me was that Scott had died because of a baseball bat. I kept replaying that in my head, and this is a symbol of Americana almost, and yet it had been used for something so violent. And I hadn't seen what had happened in the dorm room, but I didn't even really know what Scott looked like. I had pictures of him, but that was it. And I just kept replaying this scene of baseball bats and bodies, and it was very emotionally draining on me because I kept thinking back to that, and I had to push myself to get past that visual and realize that there was a story to be told, and then it wasn't about me, it was about them. And I think that journalistic mindset really helped me overcome any personal emotions I brought into the story. It also helped to go home and talk with my family about what had happened and let them know how I was feeling.
There's no way to really prepare for this kind of thing. Unfortunately, there's no way to be ready for this kind of thing. However, the Dart Center, their website gives a lot of really good advice. journalism in general, a lot of professors can help you just by covering things on deadline. A lot of that kind of practice helps, because really that's what this boils down to, is getting things out as quickly as you can. As far as the emotional side goes, I don't know if there's really a way to prepare for that, because, I mean, somebody dying hits you in a way you're not going to expect or prepare for.
Make sure that as editors you have a plan for if something like this happens, that you have a setup. And now obviously if it's never happened and you've never been through it, you're not going to know entirely what to do, but you need to have some idea exactly what you're going to do first, how you're going to organize people. You need to have some kind of plan in place. Your staff needs to talk about this. Your editorial staff needs to talk about these types of things on a regular basis. And then emotionally, you're going to go through it. You're dealing with death, violence, tragedy, and you're dealing with it in a place where you normally feel safe, where you don't expect these kind of things to happen. You know, and as a college newspaper, this is your school. This is, you know, this is home. This means something to you. So you're going to feel it emotionally. That's the reality. Understand that. Understand what that means, that it's hard. There's going to be times you need to walk away. There's going to be times you need to talk to people. There's going to be times you need to cry. And just do it. You know, look out for each other. Make sure that you're taking care of yourselves in that way and that you're there for each other.
I definitely think it's important to look at coverage that other journalists did of, you know, huge events like 9/11 or Hurricane Katrina, and it's hard for us to think, oh, someday we're going to be covering that, or that something like that would help a school shooting, help you cover a school shooting, but it really does. You see what people are like when they're emotional, and there's just high tensions going everywhere, and it helps to be aware that people are emotional in these times and that you have to be careful. You can't just say whatever comes to your mind. So it's important to train yourself ahead of time to be sensitive.
I definitely learned that if an event or a violent crime occurs in your small community where you yourself feel very safe, it can affect you on multiple levels. A lot of our staff had very emotional reactions to what had happened because of things in their past, including myself. And so I think it's just really important for people to realize that this type of thing is going to bring up emotions and bring up feelings that you normally just suppress. And it's okay. You just have to make sure that you're putting the story first and not yourself. It really isn't about you. Journalism is about telling the story of somebody's life. And in our case, it was telling the story of Scott and what had happened. That's number one.
Emotionally, I think I was strong enough to handle it. Some people are not, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's important they get help, but I was fine. But I think it'll benefit me if I ever have to deal with anything close to that or even more traumatic. I can look back at this and say, hey, I did just fine then. I'll be fine with this too.
I really wish, and there's not necessarily a way to enforce this, but I wish more people would have utilized the counselors and really sat down and gone through everything together. I didn't actually call my dad until like 3 nights after the homicide happened and tell him what happened. I wish I had done that right away, because sometimes just talking to somebody that you know loves you and you know doesn't expect a news story out of you is really good. It kind of brings you back to home, I guess. So I really advise that everybody, if they're handling this kind of thing, call somebody outside of the news world.
I realized that all of my emotions that I had been going through and memories that had been brought up by this event really were completely natural, and that it was okay. So I kind of wish I had known that before, and that I had been prepared with any sort of materials that could have been offered, or even just a class, a day or two in a class that could have talked about what it's like to cover trauma and the effect that it can have on your personal life and on your journalistic life.
With emotional staff members, you know, when I saw people reaching their breaking points, people breaking down, I just took them aside, separated them, you know, went outside and just sat and talked with them, told them to take a break, told them to go home for a little bit, gave them the number of the counselors that were available to talk to. Really, that was something I really tried to stay on top of. I know myself personally, I mean, I was having a hard time dealing with it emotionally, so I was real sensitive to when I saw my staff members going through that, and really tried to intervene almost immediately and give them that chance to step away and take a break, take a breath, do something else, walk away from it. And there were a couple cases where people just really kept having a tough time, and I handed them the number for the counselors and said, pull out your cell phone right now. You need to make this call, and you need to go talk to somebody. And I think that's important, especially at the editor-in-chief and managing editor level. When you're coordinating these things, you really need to be aware, one, of where you feel and how you stand, and know when you need to take a break and you need to talk to someone and you need to walk away, you need to go in an office and shut the door and cry, whatever. And then right immediately on after that, first you have to take care of yourself, but then you need to take care of your staff members. It's hectic. It's a hectic situation. You're going. Information is getting out. You got a million people doing a million different things all at once, and it's hectic and it's frustrating. And there is an emotional toll, and you really got to watch your people that are working for you and making sure that you are having them talk about it, having them take those breaks, having them cry if they need to, having them, slam a door, whatever. But really, you need to, that should be a primary focus of how you're managing your staff, so that, people aren't just falling by the wayside.